Alright, today I have another quick Roguetech guide. This time is going to be over cooling. So the first thing to note is the engine that you use has built-in heat sinks. Every engine included in its tonnage has the tonnage for 10 heat sinks. The engines have a minus whatever heatsink ton up to 250. The 250 rated core is the first one that does not have required external heat sinks. But all this really means is it's going to take up slots, and you have to have the actual heat sinks. So in this example, there's 5 heat sinks in the engine, and you need 5 external heat sinks to be able to drop the mech, which gives you a total cooling of 30 with single heat sinks. And again, these heat sinks, as you can see, do not take any tonnage because they're included in the engine tonnage. So default base heat sinking of any mech is 30. You literally cannot drop onto the battlefield with less than 30 heat sinking. But if you have a larger engine core, for example the 250, you do not need any external heat sinks to cover those 10 heat sinks. On that note, the larger engine cores, I believe starting, 275 and higher, have extra heatsink capacity. So the heatsink capacity goes from anywhere from 1 up to 5 for, I believe it's just 390 and 400 cores have 5. So with that, if you go to, no, I don't know where it is, I'll just scroll down to it. If you go down to the engine heat sinks, with a large enough core, you can use this slot right here to add up to 5 extra heat sinks. Now, these heat sinks you'll see up here, 58.5 goes up to 63.5 because every engine heat sink that you add in addition to the base 10 does take a ton. The engine tonnage only covers the first 10 heat sinks. But this is a way, especially late game with assault mechs, to be able to save slots in exchange for heat sinks. So you can get the extra heat sinking and not take up the slots. So you can see now it's at 45 heat sinking because of those 5 single heat sinks in addition to the regular 10. So you can see here the engine in this mech right now has 15 single heat sinks. Now another thing to note with this engine heatsink slot is if you upgrade the mech's cooling, for example to double heat sinks, it automatically upgrades this engine heatsink plus whatever into that type of heatsink. So now you see it's 15 double heat sinks, and with the same exact equipment and just the double heatsink kit, this mech is now cooling at 90 instead of 45. So that engine heatsink slot is a really good way of saving slots, as well as upgrading a mech if you, for example, don't have double heat sinks or clan double heat sinks. You can use that engine heatsink slot to cover the heat sinking that you would want without having to actually have the heat sinks. But the main benefit is this heatsink plus 5 slot takes up, it reduces the number of slots for those 5 double heat sinks. So you see here that's 15 slots without using the engine heatsink, and those 15 slots you can save by just upgrading the engine heatsink slot there to a plus 5. Again, assuming you have a large enough engine core. So that's what's going on with these notes on the engine cores. The minus blank heat seeking tons is how many external heat sinks you need to make the mech viable that the engine core covers the weight of. And I can show you the minus 5 heat sink ton here means that even with the double heat sink kit you would have to have 5 double heat sinks just to be able to run that engine core. And you'll see here it's the base, oops, I still have the heatsink plus 5. You'll see here that is the base 60 heat sinking. Now, I am fairly certain that the double heatsink kit, the Radical Proto double heatsink kit, yeah, it does not have the heatsink slot. So even if you are using a larger core, like the 390, you do not get to have Proto double heat sinks in that slot. So Proto double heat sinks are special in that they reduce weapon heat generation. So each one reduces weapon heat generated by 3%. And it cools a little bit more than a regular single heat sink. So 1 slot, 1 ton for -4 heat per turn. But the -3% weapon heat is really strong, and it stacks. So the base double heat sink kit with the 10 engine heat sinks gives -20% weapon heat generated and -10 heat per turn. So altogether, without any protos in, you have the 60 cooling for the Proto double heat sinks. So regardless, it's -60 heat, and it's -20% weapon heat generated. So Proto double heat sinks are really good for high heat builds, but they're not so great if you're just running nothing but ballistic and missile weapons. The real danger of them, though, is, as you can see here, it says volatile. So for every Proto double heat sink, including I believe the kit itself as well. Yeah, there it is. The pressurized coolant can explode for 100 heat, and 50% of that is damage and stability damage. So the Proto double heat sink kit and the Proto double heat sinks themselves, if they get crit, will explode and potentially destroy your mech. That's the trade-off. But if you're running a high heat build, they are very powerful because they do stack. So that's 20% weapon heat generation reduction from just the kit, and an extra 3% for every Proto double heat sink. So in this example, if I load up all 12 of the Proto double heat sinks that I have, those 12 give 36% weapon heat reduction in addition to the 20% from the kit. So that's a 56% weapon heat reduction. So you can imagine how useful that is whenever you're running things like Clan ER PPCs that have 56 heat per. So that 56 heat with a 56% reduction comes out to like, actually let's just see. It comes out to 32 heat. So 12 Proto double heat sinks and the kit reduce the 56 heat to 32. Which adds up. I mean, especially if you have a, say, 140, 150 heat build, you can save a ton of heat using protos and make something that otherwise wouldn't be viable work. You just have to keep in mind that all it takes is a through armor crit and you can lose your mech to internal explosions. So the only difference between a double heatsink kit and a clan double heatsink kit is what type of heatsinks they use, obviously. And if you're just using the kit with engine heatsinks, there is absolutely no difference. So if you're just using the clan double heatsink kit or the double heatsink kit with the engine heatsink slot, if that's all you're using, there is absolutely no difference between the clan heatsink kit and the regular double heatsink kit. But if you're using any engine core lower than 250, for example the -4 heatsink ton here, if you're using the double heatsink kit, you would have to have 4 double heatsinks taking up 12 slots just to be at the 10 for your mech to be droppable. However, instead of those 12 slots, if you're using a clan double heatsink kit, then you're able to use clan double heatsinks, which only take 2 slots each. So that same engine only requires you to take up 8 slots with heatsinks if you're using the clan double heatsink kit. And obviously, if you're doing a higher heat build, even if you are using the engine heatsink +5, for example, even if you are using, scroll down, even if you're using the engine heatsink +5, if you want to add even more cooling, because with the +5, you're already at 90, but let's say you have a very, very high heat build, and you want to stack up another 6 heatsink doubles. With clan heatsink doubles, you still have half of your side torsos left if you put them there. As compared to if you were using regular heatsink doubles, you wouldn't have any slots left in your side torsos. Another benefit of the clan heatsinks is you can actually fit them in your legs. So if you want clan heatsink doubles in your legs, that's actually viable, whereas the regular double heatsinks cannot fit in the legs or the center torso. But other than that, they are identical. They weigh 1 ton, and they sink 6 heat per turn. So you can see here, this is 138 heat sinking. So 5 in the core, or 5 in the engine, and then an extra 8 outside. You can have 138 heat worth of weapons and stay heat neutral. So that is the benefit of the clan double heat sinks. And then the last thing I have to talk about as far as heat sinking components goes is the laser insulator, which requires a laser of some kind. So PPC does not work. You can see. Requires a laser. So any kind of laser, whether it be a medium laser, a medium X pulse laser, doesn't matter. Any kind of laser you can drop in, and as long as you have some kind of laser, you're able to use the laser insulator, which is half a ton for 3 heat per turn. So basically, it's half of a double heat sink, just from the cooling it gives alone. So 2 of them would be a full double heat sink clan, because it would be 2 slots for 1 ton and -6 heat per turn. But the thing that's crazy is that it also reduces heat generated by lasers by 5% per. And again, this is half a ton for 3 cooling and 5% heat generation by lasers reduction. And from my testing, it applies to all lasers in your build. So even if you just have the laser insulator in your right arm, you're able to put lasers all throughout and it'll still reduce it. So without, you got the large pulse laser here, 37. You drop in the laser insulator and now it's only 36 because that 5% reduction. Now then, that's about it for cooling as far as in the mech bay goes. Covered the kits, covered the heat sinks, covered what the little thing on the engine cores refers to. The last thing to discuss with cooling is actually in the barracks. Let me just pick a pilot real quick. Alright, Behemoth.
Standing by.
So, there are 2 pilot abilities that reduce heat. The controlled burst gunnery ability at 8 gunnery is an active that you can activate, and for 2 turns, all your weapons will generate 10% less heat with a 3-turn cooldown. So what that means is if you have a mech warrior with controlled burst, you can actually build your mech with 10% extra heat above whatever its cooling is, and just rely on controlled burst to keep from overheating. And that's very effective because it's 2 out of every 3 turns. So you activate it every 3rd turn, and 2 out of every 3 turns you're generating 10% less heat. So you can really build a redline pilot around using that ability to just alpha strike, and then maybe drop 1 weapon. And it allows you to include more damage, more armor, more whatever in exchange for not putting so many heat sinks in. The other ability that has something to do with cooling is the coolant vent ability for Guts 8. Now, I have not actually used this ability because it's interesting. So you get 60 heatsink capacity for 1 turn. But then afterwards, your cooling is reduced by 30, then 20, then 10. And then it's ready to be used again. So, in theory, it would be very useful if you're getting hit with Hydra or some other kind of incendiary round that's spiking your heat. But as far as just building your mech hot and relying on it to not overheat, it's very unreliable. Because you would be able to alpha strike, sure, with the extra 60 heat capacity, but then you'd have to turn weapons off because your cooling would be reduced for the next 3 turns. So you'd be better off just building a heat neutral mech and using a different ability. Again, the only time that I could theoretically see this being useful is if you're getting hit, for example, in a desert environment by Hydra and Inferno and incendiary rounds, and they're causing your heat to spike up, and you could use that to prevent yourself from shutting down, for example, or having an ammo explosion. But other than that, it just seems like objectively, if you're wanting to build a hot mech, controlled burst just allows you to do that, whereas the coolant vent doesn't. And that's about it for cooling.
Hey, Commander. Be with you in a second.
I can't think of anything else to add, so with that, I'll call it a video. And look forward to the weapons videos that I'm planning on doing a weapons basics video, and then one covering each type of weapon, whether it be support weapons, ballistic weapons, energy weapons, and missile weapons. So look forward to that video coming out soon, and until then, have a good one.